insulin, not the insulin, I'm sorry, but the glucose in the bloodstream. Because when you eat food, that causes your blood sugar level to rise. Because food produces the glucose. That glucose will stay in your bloodstream. That's why they say you have an elevated blood sugar. Now, if you're a healthy person and you eat your meal and you're not doing a high-fat diet, then you don't experience any problems. But if you're type 2 diabetic and you eat a high-fat meal, those cells will become coated. Thus, the glucose stays in your bloodstream, the blood sugar goes up. And it's time at that point possibly for medication. You can go ahead, next one. Even 6 hours after the meal, or a meal high in saturated fat, once again, the good cholesterol, protective ability to prevent inflammation, is also impaired. But I want to show you the very last one. A meal that's high in something called polyunsaturated fats. Your good vegetable oils like sunflower oil, safflower oil, or your plant items. It could be nuts, sunflower seeds, things like that. They will not elevate or affect the HDL cholesterol. As a matter of fact, they help it. And that's why it reads, in contrast, 6 hours after eating the meal high in polyunsaturated fats, the good cholesterol's protective effects were enhanced. So just keep that in mind. Next one. This is what I was telling you when I was talking to you about the insulin. Let me see if I can make this a little bit clearer. I wanted to get something red just to show you this is what a cell normally looks like. It's red in color. Now, this is going to be our fat here. Notice up, you see the key, and that's the insulin. The insulin is going to be the key that opens the receptor sites of the blood cell. As you can see, the big round piece is like a blood cell. I don't have my clicker with the laser point on it, but I want to show this to you. Because if you can get this particular piece here, this is going to be a key for you. See all of this here? This is just your red blood cell. This is your insulin here. This is glucose. When the fat covers this part of the cell, the insulin can no longer unlock the door for the glucose to enter in. And that's the point I wanted to show you. Is that making sense to you? If not, I can go through it again, because that is very key for you to keep in mind with each meal that you sit down and that you eat. Once again, this is the glucose here. This is the insulin. Insulin acts as a key to open the doors of the cell so that the glucose can now, as you see, enter in. Next slide. Now, we want to problem solve. How can we get rid of diabetes, or type 2, mainly type 2 diabetes? Next. Keep going. Our typical treatment is going to our doctor. And that is the first place we should start, especially if we don't know any other way in which we can pursue or go after this. You know, we overwork our doctors, and they do the best with us that they can in terms of trying to show us what we can do to deal with this. But this is their answer. You can keep going through all of them. Are many of you familiar with any of these medications? All of these are diabetic or diabetes medications. The major one that they give to most blacks is this particular one here. But with, next one. With your drugs that they give you, there are going to be side effects. But how can we reduce or get rid of diabetes? Next one. You can keep going. Keep going. If you had a sink when you went into your home, and you left the water running in that sink, and when you got back and you saw that that sink was overflowing, what would be the first thing that you would do? Very good. What would be the next thing? Very good. And the final thing? Yes, sir. Okay. some kind of way we'll work that out, because I'm trying to keep my timing going here. But they were saying the very first thing you would do would be to turn off the water. The very next thing you would do would be to unplug the sink. And the final thing you're going to do is mop up the floor. Now, in terms of diabetes, we're going to see, you can move forward to the next actual frame. The first place we're going to start with turning off the water with diabetes is going to be nutrition. Now, I'm going to need somebody to do some reading for me, because I want you to see some of the foods that are really going to help those who are diabetics to help reverse the diabetes. One of my manuals that we use is called Encyclopedias of Foods, and I'm going to go to volume 2, page 288. And the first thing I'm going to be looking at are these items here. And I'll tell you, you have beans here, nuts, and you have your fruit. You have whole grain bread and whole grain cereal here. How many of you have ever heard that diabetics cannot eat fruit? Have you ever heard that? That they cannot eat fruit because of the sugar content. Not true. This particular book that I'm going to be, or it's an encyclopedia actually, it was written by a medical doctor or a team of medical doctors. The medical doctor that headed out this project, any food item, as a matter of fact, any of the food items that you have right there in front of you, if you turn that over on the back, there's a recommended nutritional panel or recommended daily allowance of certain items. He sits on the board that determines those items, or the breakdown of what you should consume, how much, so on and so forth. So they're the ones, and I just want to give you some background on him. This would be considered our science. But for diabetes, fruit, let me share something with you. The idea that diabetics should not eat fruit because of its sugar content is a serious error. It's a serious error. Diabetics can consume fruit, but diabetics should not consume the dried fruits. The dried fruits are high in sugar content. Now, items like bananas, as you can see up on the board, but also mangoes, it says these two items are very well tolerated by diabetics. Your key when you eat fruit is the fiber. Fiber serves almost like time release. Fiber binds to the sugar itself. Thus, when you eat it, your blood sugar just doesn't shoot up or elevate. The same holds true for your whole grain items, like your whole grain bread, your whole grain cereal. And notice I'm saying whole grain items. This is going to be your start to shutting off the water in terms of diabetes. Consumption of whole grain items. Whole grain items. Also, one other item I want to share with you. Your legumes or beans. Listen to what it says. In spite of containing between 20% and 30% carbohydrates. Now, you all have probably heard bad things about carbohydrates and diabetes. Possibly, right? But let me share this with you. It says legumes are very well tolerated by diabetics, which means the same example that I just gave you. Legumes are very high in fiber. So when you consume legumes, what happens is that fiber is still attached to that particular item. So as your body breaks it down slowly. So what happens, the blood sugar slowly rises, but it gets to a point, it won't, to use the term, say, over-elevate, and it will just say, stay steady at this point. It will just stay that way. The same if you've done the whole grain items there. If this is what you're consuming throughout the day, or at your first meal, your breakfast, then your lunch, and you're going to do the other things that I will share with you, diabetes will be gone. But in addition to that, some extra added benefits. Weight will come down. And you weren't even looking to try and lose weight. But that's one of the pieces there. You can keep going.